Hello, welcome to Oracle tutorial. So today we are going to talk a little bit extensively on PLSQL. Now, for those of you who don't know, the PLSQL is sort of a procedural language extension of an SQL, meaning, and it's been developed by Oracle in the early 90s. Basically, it's giving some sort of a equivalent to a sort of a C language or any other programming language and capabilities within the Oracle database environment. So for example, you can really write a block of code to do some complex task, which is not possible sometimes but just writing a one-line SQL. Um, so that's the basics of PLSQL, and you can think that what are the advantages. One is it has sort of a block structure. So that means, as I was telling you, it's a piece of block of code instead of just one line SQL. Then it's procedural language, meaning it can support conditional statements just like any other language, like if else and loops and etc etc. It also has error handling, which is typically available in like a try and catch type of blocks in like C language or Java language or any other programs. So it has a very good error handling, uh, which is in a very SQL type, which suits very well the SQL type of environment. Means the type of exceptions you can capture. It's very related with the data, and then the last thing, which is very important, is the better performance. So for example, instead of writing 3 or 4 SQL statements from your client to the server and going once each time, you can just write a block of code and then just do it once. So for example, let's say this is your this is your application server, or where your basically application code resides, and then this is your database server, let's say, or let's put it this way. So let's say if you're going to do some complex things, so you fire one SQL, SQL2, let's say SQL3, and it could be, first SQL, it goes, and then it fetches some row records, and then with using that row you try to do something else. Then again you send it to the database, and again it comes back, and then you do find another SQL. So as you see, there are so much of network traffic. Instead of that, if you can move the SQL1, SQL2, SQL3 all within that, and whatever processing you are doing, all SQL1, 2, 3, then you just from one call you can really achieve the same purpose. So it's much better performance. So with that, let's go to the basics of PLSQL. So a standard PLSQL has really three main sections. One is declaration, execution, and exception. So declaration meaning where you declare your variables. Executions meaning where you do the actual work, meaning you update rows or you fetch rows, and you go to the looping or if and else and all that. And then exception is anything which is coming from any block of code. You deal with the exception. So this is sort of a more detailed version of this, how this is implied. So declaration is, Oracle has a reserved word called declare. So here you put a declare, and then you put something like var 1 equal to number, let's say, and then you end with a semicolon. Then begin, you can define something called a cursor, which will go through in detail, or you can do your select or update, and here you define your exception. So one exception is that, let's say, if something you're dividing by 0, so there is a syntax something like when 0 divide, do this and that, and then there is end. So So this is sort of a standard, very simple PLSQL block, but also it supports nesting. So what that means is that within begin and end, you can really nest another begin and end. So typical block, let's say if at a very granular level, you have begin, end, and if you want to deal with exception, you can put an exception. Now this is not mandatory, but it is good to have. You should always catch exception. So now this is sort of one PLSQL block. Now you can nest that. Let's in another begin, and excuse me for my handwriting, but something like this. So your, let's say you want to fetch all the department records, let's say. Okay, so fetch, let's say, department. Now for each department, so let's say you have a, okay, let me make some space here. Okay, let's write it here. So you have a little bit more space. So let's say you're fetching all department records, and you start with the begin block, and you have the end block, and you have exception. So you can define some exception. So this is fetch department. Now within what we are, for each department you fetch, you want to get all its employees and then do some more operations. So you can nest another block here, and then this is, you can do employee related processing for each department. So as you see, right, and then here also you can have its own exception. So what I'm trying to say is that this is sort of, you can do this sort of nesting. So that's some of the basic concepts of PLSQL. And let's go to let's open some SQL prompt and let's do some real coding, and I'll walk you through and see how really a real life PLSQL program looks like. So here we have a very simple PLSQL block which I was referring to you in our whiteboard work. So here we have a declare, begin, and end. Now declare is where you do a variable declaration. So what are typical variable declaration? How do you declare variable? So let's say if you want to do our employee department, where you can say salary, and you can say this is a number, right? You can define here, or you can go some more. You can define the size. You can also make it not null. Even you can give it a default value also. So this is sort of a, and then as salary also is a database column, so you can have some sort of convention that any declared variables, they will start with L. And then in the program execution, you can refer to this. You can put the value here. So let's say select salary from employee. So this is the way you, from EMP, let's say where ID equal to 1. So this is the way you wrote your SQL. In PLSQL, you can put this salary into a variable. So this is sort of the variable. So now let's say if there is no data found, let's say when this fires, and then if there is no record in EMP with ID equal to 1, then Oracle raises some sort of a error called, or it's in PLSQL terms it's called exception. It's called no data found. So no data found. So those of you who programmed in C or any other language and familiar with try and catch and catching exception, you probably can relate to this. So when no data found, then you can do something. You can display a message, DBMS output. This is also, as I told you before, this is an Oracle or PLSQL version of print statement, no record. Now if you don't raise an exception, then Oracle, you will get the system generated exception. So that's sort of typical PLSQL block. We'll do some more complicated PLSQL programming in our next video. Thank you.